So before we get started, I wanted to let everybody on Zoom know that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast on Facebook Live. Also, the only person not wearing a mask is the person speaking at this time. It's for everybody, for safety's sake. Please, if you do not want to be on camera, turn off your video at this time. And then I want to also ask that all Zoom participants please mute yourselves if you haven't already. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our August general meeting of the CSRA Parkinson Support Group. I wanted to take a moment before I introduce our speaker to introduce myself. My name is Logan Banks. I'm president of the board for the support group. My contact information is listed on the back page of our monthly newsletter. And feel free to reach out to me with any questions or concerns. Our speaker today is neuropsychologist Dr. Jeremy Hertza, executive director and CEO of Neurobehavioral Associates. Dr. Hertza deals with neurocognitive and psychiatric needs and works with a wide variety of ages and diagnoses. And today he will be speaking with us on personality and cognitive changes, motivation, and mood disturbances. Normally I can memorize all that, but I can't right now. Right before Dr. Hertza comes up to speak, I have just a couple announcements from Martha Hand, who is joining us via Zoom. She wasn't able to make it tonight, but she wanted me to share that the Care Partner event last Friday was a huge success with full attendance, and they were on WJBF Channel 6 News at night. She also wanted to share that the new Outstanding Care Partner Awards for 3 winners to each receive $500 Amazon gift card with a trophy will close for nominations on October 1st. Winners will be announced in November to all care partners of PD patients treated at AU/MCG, and anyone can make nominations simply by emailing Martha Ann at mtutor@augusta.edu, and her email is also in the newsletter. We will have time for questions at the end of Dr. Hertz's presentation for those of you in person, and for those of you joining us on Facebook, we would love to hear your questions as well. Just please feel free to submit them in the chat or to us directly at info@parkinsoncsra.org. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Hertza.
Gotta go. I'm sorry. So hi everyone. So this is probably my 3rd or 4th time speaking here over the last 15 years. I've been in Augusta for about 15 years. My specialty is the brain and how it works. So I'm a here up guy. So any questions about anything from here down, I'm not your guy. So what we're going to talk about today is personality changes, mood disorders, cognitive problems associated with Parkinson's. And I want to present it in 2 frameworks, okay? One being why. Why does this happen? And that means very brief touching on some anatomy, but really I want you to understand, like, theoretically kind of why things happen the way they do. 2 is I want to give you examples, right? I want to talk through some patients I've seen over the years because I imagine that they mirror some of the things that you all have seen, and we can all learn from each other, right? And so I learn from my patients on a day-to-day basis, and hopefully I can share some of their experiences to help you as well. So briefly, right, I'll move through kind of the nuts and bolts pretty quick, but outside of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's is really the 2nd most common neurodegenerative disease. You also have a lot of vascular issues, so people with like a lot of high blood pressure, things like that, that also affects thinking, but Parkinson's is pretty common. Now, for those of you out there, does Parkinson's typically hit in your 40s, 50s, 60s, or 70s? What do people think? 60s. So you're all right, but what's important is that typically it hits between 50 and 65, okay? Now, that's not to say the older that you get that you can't get it, because you can. It just tends to be less likely to be traditional Parkinson's and more like a Parkinsonism or one of the other diseases. So that's important because people in their 50s and early 60s are developing these diseases, while Alzheimer's is really something, at least based on current data, we see from roughly 68 on up or 70 on up, right? So Parkinson's does hit earlier than an Alzheimer's disease, but it is pretty rare prior to age 50, just like Alzheimer's is pretty rare prior to age 50. But both diseases you can get in your 20s, 30s, and so on, depending on kind of the genetic variant. Let's see. So why in the world do we get Parkinson's? Super layman's terms, right? The brain starts to change. It doesn't produce the chemicals it needs in order to foster purposeful, and automatic movement, right? So it doesn't have enough chemicals, and so it can't regulate the muscles the way it's supposed to. So what does that mean in fancy terms, right? Is that we don't have enough dopamine. What's really interesting is by the time you start to show symptoms, right? Now, first symptoms aren't always motor. If they are motor, it starts on one side of the body, typically with a pill rolling tremor, right? Sometimes you get a little jumpiness in the leg or things like that. But sometimes the first signs are apathy, where people just aren't as active. They're not as engaged. They don't want to seem to go out of the house. A huge one, which we'll talk about, is they don't want to exercise, even though the research says it's fantastic for Parkinson's. You know, you can't twist somebody's arm enough to get them to go. So you see some apathy and some personality change, some emotional blunting very early on. What's really interesting, and you'll see that here on my slide, is by the time you see that, you've already lost 60 to 80% of the dopamine. So this has been going on. We've been losing dopamine, and why? Because the part of the brain that produces it isn't producing it like it's supposed to, and we're not absorbing, you know, the way that we're supposed to. Now, what this is actually is we're talking about an alpha-synuclein protein. Now, nobody cares. Somebody does, but we don't care what you call it, right? Somebody somewhere says, yeah, absolutely, but we don't care. But what we do care about is that it's a naturally producing component of the brain. This isn't something weird that all of a sudden develops. It's a natural thing that's in the brain. But then, you know, if those signals aren't right, if there's not enough chemicals, it starts to cause us problems. It's actually the same as Alzheimer's, right? So Alzheimer's, we talk about neurofibrillary tangles and beta amyloid plaques. Well, beta amyloid is natural in the brain. We need it. It's why we can't give you an Alzheimer's drug, wipe out your beta amyloid, and you're cured, because it wipe out all the things you need too. So similarly in Parkinson's, some of the things that cause us problems are things that we need. So it's a regulation issue. Now, we talk about the basal ganglia. Basal ganglia is deep inside the brain, and I have a lovely picture coming up. There it is. I'm going to make you go back and forth on these slides. But you can see it's pretty deep inside the brain. Go 2 slides forward.
There we go.
All right, now we're good. All right. So you can see it's pretty deep inside the brain, right? Now, for those of you, for hopefully all of you, right, when you're driving, do you think about driving? No. So we have somebody honest in here, right? Most people are like, yeah, all the time, right? Mirror, yeah. No, you don't. It's an automatic motor program. You just do it. And you think about all the other crap you got to do, or all the other things going on, all that stuff. It's an automatic motor program. That's what the basal ganglia does. It's that automatic, well-learned kind of motor programs, right? It's different than saying, I want to reach for this and calculating the movement and figuring out. It's different than saying to someone, show me how you use a pair of scissors. A Parkinson's patient, for the most part, can tell you, grab the handles, you go like this, right? Now, sometimes they may go like this, but still, they understand how that works. It's actually the movement itself that's the problem. It's not translating the idea. It's not understanding the idea. It's translating it out. I am going to go back 2 slides, just to mess with you. The main parts of this, that part of the brain I showed you, the basal ganglia, it's basically a bunch of nuclei. Nuclei, little bundles, you glue them all together, and we develop we have these structures. The basal ganglia is one of them that has a lot of little motor sections connected together. And each one actually does something a little bit different. Like, for example, the subthalamic nucleus is the part of the brain that causes those super weird jerks you get sometimes, those myoclonic jerks. You're laying in bed next to your spouse, and you wake up and you smack them in the face, right? That arm just flies out, right? That's the subthalamic nucleus. The red nucleus has to do with kind of how motors transfer signals go through the brain. Point being, a lot of those things are bundled together, which is why your symptoms vary. It's not like just this one little dot is affected. You have this part of the brain affected and the areas around it. All right. So I'm going forward 3 slides. All right, let's get all this stuff on. There we go. So this is just a brief understanding of what's happening. And again, I'm trying to keep it pretty simple, but the base of the brain has to do with coordination of movement. That sends signals to the part of the brain for automatic processing, and that sends signals to our muscles, right? So 3 steps. First one is brain says, okay, we got to coordinate things. Let's send them to our brain to carry them out. Brain says, all right, let's send them to the muscles to make it happen. Fair enough. Now you see this slide here. Go next one. You don't see anything, but you will. Keep clicking. Keep going. Go. No, I did all those crazy steps on this thing. There you go. So you can see the one on the right. You see how it's dark. The stain is dark. There's like, it looks like a stripe. That's the dopamine. On the left is Parkinson's, and you can see it's missing. That's why it's called the substantia nigra, because it's black, right? So it's basically, you can literally see where you don't have enough dopamine that you're supposed to. Now, but dopamine doesn't just do motor stuff. Dopamine is tied to psychiatric disorders. It's tied to apathy, right? It's involved in everything from anxiety to depression to frustration, all these different things. So it's not like you lose dopamine. You see that right there on that picture. You don't have that coloring in there. It's not like it just affects motor, it affects a variety of things. That's really important when we talk about Parkinson's, because not only does our loved one, not only do we have to adjust to the fact that we're progressively losing our purposeful movement, the coordination of purposeful movement, of automatic movement, but on top of that, the chemicals are changing. So you could ask somebody, you could say, hey, you depressed? No, I'm good. You feeling sad? Nope. You helpless? No. Feel hopeless? No. Well, you sure look sad. Yeah. And you'll have the masked face, no expression of emotion, looks like they're, going to jump off a bridge. But they literally cannot control those muscles of the face tied to expression of emotion, and it's chemically based, right? The other thing that's important, and again, we'll talk as we go through this, is the apathy you see in Parkinson's is not often related to depression, right? So you get the person I talked about at the beginning, right? Please go to physical therapy, please, right? We want you to keep you walking, keep you moving. The longer you go without moving, the more likely you're not going to do it again, and so on and so on and so on. And your loved one sits there and goes, yeah, great, okay. Sure thing. And it doesn't happen. And they don't want to leave the house, and they don't want to be around other people. But that isn't necessarily a sign of depression, right? That's a sign of the effect of the lack of chemicals on the brain itself. You could have symptoms of depression. Fatigue is a symptom of depression. It's also a symptom of 1,200 other things, right? So we can't assume there's a mood disorder, even though there's mood symptoms. Next one. So real quickly with Parkinson's, there's primary Parkinson's, secondary, and atypical. People think there's just Parkinson's disease, and that is the farthest thing from the truth. There are Parkinson plus diseases, which are basically kind of offshoot diseases. One example would be Lewy body. Lewy body looks like Parkinson's, except if you give somebody Parkinson's meds, or if you give them an antipsychotic, they lock up, and they tend to have hallucinations of people or animals. And the hallucinations come early. They come really, really early. The thinking problems come a little bit later. But it's almost always people and animals. If they hallucinate inanimate objects, it's usually not a Lewy body. And Lewy body disease also has that same protein we talked about earlier, the Alpha-Synuclein Protein. It's also involved in that as well. Other ones are cortical basal degeneration, progressive supranuclear palsy, multiple system atrophy. Frankly, they tell you exactly what's wrong. So progressive supranuclear palsy says that those nuclei are breaking down. Cortical basal degeneration says the cortex, the outside of the brain, and the basal ganglia, which is the part we talked about earlier, are breaking down. Multiple system atrophy says the whole brain is starting to go, right? And Lewy body we talked about. Now, you can also have Parkinson's as a reaction to different things. It could do to stroke. You can end up with Parkinsonian symptoms. Toxins, drugs, infections. It could be metabolic, right? We can't just assume because someone has a pill-rolling tremor or they have some rigidity that it's Parkinson's. And there's plenty of people that have Parkinsonism, right? Parkinsonism is not Parkinson's disease. It is, in reality, some of the symptoms, particularly the motor and the tremor, right? But it's not tied to any progressive disease, and that is highly genetic. We see that really across families. But you can't write that off or brush that one off because these people still have trouble feeding themselves and managing ADLs, IDLs, functioning day to day. So you really can't ignore it. The other thing that I think is directly relevant is Parkinson's disease is not the same as Parkinson's disease dementia. It's not. You have people that have Parkinson's disease that never get demented. Never. Now they slow down, let's be real. Okay? Parkinson's is slowing everything down. It slows how fast you move, it slows how fast you think, it slows all those things. But if you don't have a Parkinson's disease dementia, your memory's pretty good. It may take you a while. Those words may find you, you may not find them, right? But either way, you can still do it in a process. But within that Parkinson's group, there is a portion that does go on to develop Parkinson's disease dementia. And that's where basically it moves beyond that basal ganglia that we talked about and starts affecting other areas of the brain. So again, it's important that we understand that it's not just Parkinson's, and that each one of these things being talked about actually has totally kind of different symptoms. So for example, in Lewy body, we have the hallucinations. We talk about the psychiatric problems, right? You don't usually see that in straight Parkinson's. In progressive supranuclear palsy, you can't move your eyes right. A lot of rigidity in the neck, a lot of mood problems. Multiple system atrophy, frankly, you don't really live past a couple of years. Things go really, really fast in MSA. So they're all pretty different. One thing to point out before I move to the next slide is you'll see on there in the primary, there's juvenile Parkinsonism. There is Parkinson's in kids. It is different, but it does happen. So within Parkinson's, next slide, sorry. You have idiopathic or genetic, right? Meaning it just happens because ... which is like half of Alzheimer's, just ... Or it's genetic. And sometimes you could have it due to drug-induced, particularly the anti-dopaminergics, meaning they suck too much dopamine, so now you have symptoms, right? And again, we talk about some of these different diseases. In kids, one of the real kind of rare diseases that causes it is Wilson's disease. And one of the things you notice in there is rings around the eyes, copper rings around the eyes, and it has to do with copper metabolism. That's why kids get it. But you can actually look at their eyes and see the ring, and you know they have it. So what do you do with Parkinson's? I'm gonna flip 2 slides forward. Okay. Yeah, perfect. So actually, I'm gonna do this. So 4 major features, and then I'm gonna roll this into mood. 1, slow movement. Yes, right. Reduced blink. Decreased facial expression. Decreased gesturing. Right when you're talking. A soft voice. You're not projecting yourself. Difficulty getting out of your chair and moving, right? Reduced arm swing. When you walk, you're real tight, no arm swing. End block turns. You rotate on one foot, pivot on one foot. It's called an end block turn, right? Rigidity in the elbows and the shoulders. Cogwheeling, which is the jerkiness that you get in your muscles and your shoulders and in here, right? Tremor, usually pill rolling, usually involves the thumb. Always starts on one side of the body, then moves to both. Always starts on one. Starts at both at the same time. It's not traditional Parkinson's. Okay. Rigidity, which is that locus and spasticity, and then postural changes, right? So this is what we typically think of. 4 cardinal motor symptoms: slow movement, tremor, rigidity, postural issues. But that's just the motor piece, right? It's just the motor piece. Next slide, please. Right? So you might write smaller, you might be really stiff, you might be shuffling. Your voice might be low. We might have these symptoms we talked about, but what are the non-motor symptoms, right? So it involves your whole brainstem, including everything from smell to taste to personality, right? Even general body functions, constipation, dream inactive, Rem Sleep Disorders common. Anyone know what Rem Sleep Disorder is? You act out your dreams, right? You act out your dreams. You can also get it where sleep-wake cycle gets totally funky, and you're sleeping all day or up all night. You have no idea. You're confused as to kind of what's where, when. And often those come first. Often the mood symptoms come first. And of course, you don't know it at the time. You think your spouse is ignoring you or not paying attention or super depressed. And then 3 years later, you're like, huh, maybe they weren't as little bit of a jerk, but not as big of a jerk, right? I mean, there's still some selective attention anyway. Right, and so other things is we have depression and anxiety. We have autonomic problems regulating blood pressure, urinary issues, GI issues, sleep issues, insomnia, hypersomnia, sleep apnea can be a direct result of Parkinson's disease, right? And real quick, and then I'll move on. if you have sleep apnea, you must use a CPAP. I could care less how much it pisses you off. I don't care if it's annoying, if it dries your face out, if your spouse wants to throw you out the window. But what you're doing then every night is not going to give enough oxygen to the brain, and you're setting yourself up for dementia. If a stroke is not enough oxygen to the brain, and every night you're not going to get enough oxygen, you think you're going to end up with a problem? Of course. So you get over it, and you do what you got to do to get enough oxygen to the brain. Because we need to protect ourselves from these diseases. Really famous study, and I encourage you to look it up. It's the nun study. And they looked at Alzheimer's in nuns. And it's funny, they use nuns because nuns don't do the stupid things the rest of us do. Right? So you can control for tons of factors. And what they found, and this is tied to Alzheimer's, but it also bleeds into Parkinson's, is that when, and these were predominantly women, obviously, they had the gene for Alzheimer's on the APOE4 allele, and Alzheimer's is in a variety of alleles and chromosomes, anywhere between 3 and 5 of them, but regardless. And they found that women that exercise 3 days a week, 40 minutes a shot, doing a combined weight training and cardio, reduced the likelihood of the gene being expressed by like 73%. So then they stopped exercising. Screw this sucks, right? I'm out. I ran, it's good, I'm done, right? After about 2 weeks, they lost the benefit. So this actually really makes sense when you think about it. Because if I'm sitting here and I'm not too stressed and I'm sleeping all right and I'm eating all right, and I can go to all these 6 hospitals I go to a week, right? And I've had the vaccine, but I'm way less likely to get COVID because I'm not immune compromised, because I'm exercising and doing these things and I'm sleeping well. So my brain and my body can fight things off. So if I have more oxygen and I have more nutrients, then my body can fight its genetics. Just like you have people, if they exercise and they work out hard, they can fight their genetics on heart disease. They can fight their genetics on arthritis. That doesn't mean they're not going to get it, but they can put it off 5 years, 10 years. So Alzheimer's is no different. Parkinson's is no different. So that's why the physical exercise, we talk about oxygen with the CPAP and sleep apnea. You need oxygen. You need to be moving. Your heart needs to be pumping. You need all the nutrients and all that oxygen to be able to fight these things off, right? And what do we know about movement in Parkinson's? When you stop moving, you go downhill fast. That is just the reality of it. And that is an incredibly tough situation because typically there's a lot of pushback from the patient because it's really hard. Number one, it's really hard. It's a lot of work and they're not motivated anyway because they're dopamine shot. So you just have a lot of things kind of working against you. You do get psychosis sometimes in Parkinson's, but typically it's Lewy body or it's Parkinson's disease dementia, and fatigue is super common, right? Fatigue is super common. So again, some early complaints, and this is important because these are the ones that you often see really early on, sometimes even before the motor symptoms. And everyone focuses on the motor symptoms because they're so obviously impacting day-to-day functions. But like, what's the point if you're not happy? Like, seriously, you're going through all this therapy and all this stuff and fighting to stay independent, but if you're miserable, like, so like you can't ignore this. You can't ignore the depression, you can't ignore the anxiety or the frustration or any of these things. It's also important that you understand why it's happening so you don't blame your spouse, right? And that they understand that it's not on purpose. You're not defying them or pushing against them. I have a patient in particular that I'm thinking about as I talk about this. And there are a couple I've known for about 10 years. And their constant argument was 2 things. 1, drinking enough water, and 2 was the exercise. And the wife knew absolutely 100%, very vigilant, understood the research, right? That it makes a huge difference. And he was really freaking tired of her telling him what to do. He was tired of being treated like a child. He was tired of not being offered to make his own choices. He was tired of having to work so hard. Now, he wanted to be functional, he wanted to be independent, but you know, it's so much work and he's tired of being nagged. So instead of them trying to approach this as a team, it really got to be a back and forth where it's affecting their marriage, it's affecting quality of life. And the years that they have left together that are good are now marred by conflict and frustration. You got enough real things going on, right? Next slide. So I'm going to go a little bit more into each of these. depression, anhedonia, apathy, anxiety, dementia, slowed processing speed, and psychosis. Next one. So we'll start with depression and anxiety. About 60% of people with Parkinson's have some type of mood disorder. And the reality is the research varies tremendously because sometimes they count the symptoms as being depressed and sometimes they count them as being related to Parkinson's. That's what we talked about. But the reality is most people should be depressed. We don't blame them, right? They're trying to cope with the stuff that's going on. And even if they're the most well-adjusted person on the planet, the chemicals are being altered in the brain, right? And we all know, women in here, as you go through menopause, right? Or as you were pregnant, you know the impact of hormones and chemicals on your body. Men, we can tell ourselves whatever we want. We go through the same thing. But right, in reality, we all understand the impact of whether it's men reduced testosterone or whether it's women going through menopause. We understand how chemicals and hormones affect our body and our emotions. And these are the things that are happening right in our Parkinson's patients and our loved ones. What are some of the early symptoms that we see? Feeling very sad or anxious, kind of an empty mood, right? Hopelessness, feeling discouraged or pessimistic. Guilt is extremely common. In particular, feeling like you're burdening your loved ones, right? Feeling worthless, hopeless, helpless, not enjoying things you used to. Feeling uncomfortable socially because you can't do the things you are. Are you less of a person than you were before? And frankly, you get tired really fast, physically, mentally. Sleeping, early morning awakening, oversleeping. Typically, sleep gets more and more over time. We have less and less waking hours because the brain tires out faster. So it just needs more sleep to keep it together. You don't often get the sundowning that you get in Alzheimer's where 4 o'clock rolls around, they're super confused. People just seem to kind of fizzle out with Parkinson's. Need a lot more naps. It gets much harder to rouse them from those naps and get them re-engaged, and usually your best time is going to be your 10 to 12 in the morning, right? You get them up, you get going, and then you get a period where people do well, and then again, you can have a little bit more problems as they get tired. We do have thoughts in death and suicide. Suicide isn't as common as you might think in Parkinson's, frankly, because it's really hard for them to do it. Usually have family members keeping an eye on their meds. It's hard for them to coordinate movements to hang themselves or shoot themselves or do some of these other horrible things. So there's a lot of thoughts of death and thoughts of suicide, but actual suicide isn't as common. The other thing that's important, and this one I think people miss. Any of you here, when you get stressed out, ever get headaches? Anyone? No one, huh? Good, we got some finally, right? Come on, right? What about stomach aches? Anyone? Stomach aches, when you're super stressed out, butterflies in your stomach, things like that, right? What about tired? I get that one, right? I get that one. So what we know is emotional disturbance, anxiety, depression, stress cause physical symptoms. True? When you're depressed, you have less energy. Now, the other thing is anxiety and depression also affect thinking. Do you guys agree with that? Everyone agree with that? Right? So when you're depressed, you're thinking slow and you can't remember anything, right? And you have a no-saying bias, meaning, do you remember that? Nope. Don't even try it, screw it. Nope. Alzheimer's actually has the yes-saying bias. Do you remember that? Yeah, sure I do. No, sure, right? So you can actually tell by bias whether it's more depression or whether it's more organic. Somebody with Parkinson's is going to cover it up. Yeah, I remember everything. We had a great time together, right? They don't want you to know they have problems. Someone that's depressed, don't remember it all. Can't do it. Sorry. But what's important, and so let's go back to anxiety. Anxiety, racing thoughts, disorganized thoughts. Problems focusing, problems with memory, problems with processing speed. So it's a double whammy, right? You have emotional problems causing thinking problems, and thinking problems causing emotional problems, and you got to adjust to the whole thing at once, and your chemicals are all out of whack. Right? And that's why the emotional stuff, on top of chemically, why the emotional stuff often hits first, is because people know before they tell you something's funny. Right? I mean, people will say all the time in my office, if they're being truly honest, they'll say to me, you know what, Dr. Hertza, yeah, I felt like I was slowing down. I thought I was just tired. I thought I was, overworking. Usually this is kind of at the end when people are getting to retire, they notice symptoms. I thought it was just getting to me and I was just getting old, and I just kind of brushed it off at the time. And I was just feeling sad and not motivated. Upon reflection, these symptoms come first, but you do like everybody else. Yeah, whatever. Just like we all do. Until you start noticing it's progressing, you notice more things. So it's not just because of the stress of the diagnosis, right? And the reality is a lot of the motor symptoms that are going back and forth really kind of mess with your emotions. Because Parkinson's does ebb and flow, particularly in the beginning. It's kind of like the tides, it just kind of goes like back and forth, but they keep moving forward, right? Eventually it's going to get your stuff you put at the top of that beach that you hope those waves don't get. So it just kind of keeps moving forward, but it goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, right? Now, if you notice someone with that masked face, just ask. Don't assume they're depressed. Ask them, do you feel sad? Are you feeling pretty hopeless? And if they say no, but they look like they're about to like jump in traffic, right? Believe them. And ask very detailed, specific questions, right? How are you feeling day to day? Do you feel energized? And go on, right? Now, SSRIs, traditionally antidepressants, do help, right? So your Zoloft and your stuff like that, those helps. But like a benzo, those are some things you really should avoid. Now, I won't go into deep into treatment and different meds, what, where, when, and why. Certainly I can answer questions if you ask me, but there are medications that are way better to handle mood in Parkinson's, and there are medications in general we should kind of avoid. And what you really got to be careful of is, so let's say you have somebody that has chronic anxiety, and you decide I'm going to throw them on, I don't know, Klonopin or Xanax. What do those do, guys? What does anyone here ever take Klonopin or Xanax? Seriously, none of you?
Zone me out. Zone me out. Thank you.
It slows you down. It's a tranquilizer, right? Well, you should probably not tranquilize someone with Parkinson's. They don't need to be slower. I mean, right? You think they're going to fall now? Wait till you give them a ton of Klonopin, right? Or Ambien, right? Or some of the blood pressure meds, or some of the antipsychotics. So you have to be careful. You have to weigh these things. If you have a Parkinson's patient and they're sitting there and they're taking a bunch of benzos, you have a problem. Because you are making the Parkinson's worse by managing the mood the wrong way. And so it's really important that whoever's prescribing those meds or helping you understands Parkinson's. So they're medicating it in a way that doesn't make those Parkinson's symptoms move faster, right? We have that same problem in Alzheimer's, and we have that same problem in traumatic brain injury. And frankly, we run into that exact same problem, but the opposite for people that have attention deficit disorder that are anxious. Let's take someone who has ADD, right, and give them a bunch of anxiety meds, or actually let's give them a stimulant, right, that speeds them up, but they're already anxious. They're going to crawl through their skin. So the point is, you have to look at, really the big picture. So you want to consider like support services and therapy for people and caregivers. Geriatric psychiatrists are usually much better than a traditional psychiatrist. Certainly a neurologist is fine, but the brain, providers for the brain are kind of a weird group, right? I'm sure I fall in that too. But like, you have psychiatry that manages mental health. You have neurology that does brain and body, but like brain neurology, but it's the same organ. You don't go to cardiology and they just deal with one valve. It's ridiculous, right? But somehow, when it comes to the brain, you have two totally different disciplines that do a terrible job of communicating. So you need someone that really understands both. Hey, I'm going to give this medication for movement, but this is the emotional stuff it's going to cause. I'm going to give this for hallucinations in Lewy body, but hey, it's going to lock them up. They're going to fall all over the place. So you got to really understand that balance. Or I have someone with a sleep problem. I'm going to put them on, if not Ambien, I don't know, Benadryl, just terrible. Don't take Benadryl for sleep. Please don't take Benadryl for sleep. There's a direct relationship between Benadryl and how fast Alzheimer's comes. Yep, don't take it. Okay, you can take that Z-Quill stuff, like the NyQuil without the quill or whatever, right? That stuff, the research is much better. But anyway, yeah, no Benadryl for sleep. So again, this is the point, right? You need someone that understands all these different things, and you need to find the right provider. Hallucinations and dementia. Really, the dementia piece comes later on. So you don't start demented, it comes later on. Now, if we think about Parkinson's as a disease of the basal ganglia, right, it's that part of the brain I showed you, the substantia nigra, the dark strip, right, you saw in the picture. But we also know that Parkinson's is subcortical disease. What the world does that mean? Well, the cortex is the outside of the brain, subcortical, beneath the outside. Okay, what does it really mean? Wires. Okay, Parkinson's is a disease that affects the wires. And not just the wires for movement, all wires, right? All wires. Basically, it turns you into an old house. So you can buy one of these houses right up on the hill, and they look beautiful, except those plaster walls are going to be a problem. But you go in, you buy this house, and you put in these really cool light fixtures, super modern, and the stupid things still flicker because of the wires. Light fixture's fine. Light bulb is brand new. Even got a smart light bulb. Still flickers. It's a wire issue. So Parkinson's is a wire issue. That's why symptoms vary, and that's why slow processing speed is the #1 issue as a whole, because the signal across the wires is changing. Now, when you develop a Parkinson's disease dementia, you basically move beyond that basal ganglia and started affecting the other wires in different directions. So now it's affecting the brain as a whole. Now, Parkinson's disease dementia does not look like Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is considered a cortical dementia. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't affect parts inside the brain. Sure, it does. In fact, one of the real key parts that it affects is a part called the limbic system, which is deep in the brain. Point being, though, when you look at Parkinson's, it's subcortical, it's beneath, right? It's the inside, and it's wires. And that's what's affecting ultimately all the things that we see. So in Alzheimer's, let me think of a good example. All right, I'll talk about my 10-year-old. His name's Finley, right? Great kid, smart kid, and gifted. He still likes me, so it's good. Right? So I tell Finley, go get your video games, right? Sure, Dad, right? Where is it? It's in my closet. Where? Yeah, I'll be back, Dad. Right? 2 hours later, he comes back and he finds, where have you been? It's been a long time, Dad. It was in there somewhere. Now you open that closet, it is a mess, but it's full. It's full, he's right, it's in there. It took him forever to find the thing. That's Parkinson's disease dementia. The closet's full, but you can't find things when you want. It takes you 2 hours, and then you finally found it. You knew it was in there, but holy crap, it takes forever. In Alzheimer's, the closet's empty. There's nothing to find. The structures of the brain that allows you to fill the closet doesn't work. So the stuff that's already in the closet stays there till the end, old memories. But you can't put new stuff in the closet. That's not Parkinson's. Parkinson's is you can't find it. Now, if you give people hints, you give them enough time, it'll slowly come to them. Now, as the disease advances in the end, it takes so long for them to find it that they've lost attention and fizzled out, right? But it truly is a wires issue. Now, that doesn't mean you can't develop Alzheimer's too. You can. It's not nearly as common to have both of those diseases at once, but they're not mutually exclusive. But they do affect the brain in very, very, very different ways. And that's important for our Parkinson folks, because even though they may have masked faces, even though they may struggle with their emotions, they're still them, right? Alzheimer's, you really lose that. You really lose that as the disease advances. Hallucinations, if you have them, are usually visual, animals, people. It really seems to be animals, which is kind of bizarre. But if you look at the research, it really is almost always animals and people. Although, funny story, it's not funny, but when you do what I do, and when you deal with what you guys have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, you have to laugh at the hard things you run into, right? So this is a patient last week comes in, and it's a Lewy body dementia, which is ultimately what I diagnosed. But the guy comes in, he says, I'm totally fine. No idea why I'm here. He has a little bit of a tremor, just a little, right? Just a little. If he pushes harder, he holds something hard, it gets better. If he like writes small and pushes hard, he says it gets better. He says, oh, my mom had that, it's nothing, right? He says, my biggest problem is my wife. Okay, what's the problem with your wife? Well, a couple days ago, I walked into my house, right? And she was sleeping with 5 men and the family dog on the couch. So the wife says, I did not sleep with our dog. And of course the guy says, well, then you did the other 5 people. Right? It's funny, but legitimately, like this is what he believed. And you could not convince him otherwise. Could not. So the next day, and she was pretty freaked out by that, you think? And she's like, I'm like 70 years old. Like, are you serious? Anyway, so she's like, okay, whatever, something's funky. I'll get to the doctor when I can. COVID's out there, whatever. So the next day comes around and she sees him digging a hole in their backyard. Like a hole. She comes up to him and she says, hey, honey, like, what are you doing? I'm digging a grave. So of course, your first question is like, is it for me? Right? No, I killed somebody last night and I'd really like your help burying them. Will you help me? And perfect response from the wife, right, was maybe. Right, let's see what's going on here, right? Maybe. So mental note, if your spouse ever does that to you, the answer is maybe. Not no, not yes, maybe. So, right? So ultimately, he was totally hallucinating. Completely hallucinating, wanted her to help him bury this body. He was super upset, really distressed, thought he killed someone, and the whole thing was a hallucination. And he 100% believed it was real. Even though, from a reality perspective, it's so deviant from anything that even rationally would happen. But he couldn't make sense of, I saw it was so vivid, but then, like, right, those wires, right? The connection between the logic and the hallucinations and the situation and your own insight, right? The logic gets muddled. But the brain tries to make sense the best it can. Example, in alcoholism, there's something called Wernicke's-Korsakoff syndrome, right? Sounds fancy, but really it's pretty interesting because what happens is people drink so much that they don't eat, right? They have their lovely liquid meals. And so what happens is your B vitamins just drop through the floor and you get super, super confused. And when you go into the hospital, you actually, the way the brain's trying to make sense of what's going on, and you could sit there and I could take my phone and put it in front of them, I could take my keys, and usually I try to put something like really weird and personal, like I have a picture like my daughter in my wallet, and I might set it down or whatever. And I'll ask them about like their childhood, and they will always make up a story about their own life using my objects. And I can control their history, what they tell me based on what I put in front of them. I could pull something away and pull something back, and sure enough, now it's in the next story. Right? So the brain does its best to make sense of things, even when it doesn't make sense. A lot of people with Parkinson's have hypnagogic and hypnopompic delusions, not hallucinations, illusions. That is when you fall asleep and when you wake up, you're half awake, you have no freaking idea what's going on, and your computer's really slow to turn on that day. So the brain misperceives. It might see a shadow out of the corner of the wall, and you think you see something, a rat's over here, or somebody out the window. But you're not fully awake, and the brain is just slow to come online. And people freak out, oh, they're hallucinating. No. Brain's just, you got an old computer here, it's taking a while to boot up. So it's important that you recognize the difference between those things. If they're talking about shadows and things like that, right? And particularly if it's morning or night, that's almost always the illusions, okay? Now, Parkinson's can sometimes affect vision, as you guys know, optic nerve and all these other things. So vision can be funky, but that's not what we're talking about. But if we go back to what we said earlier, if it's animals or people, you got a whole nother problem, right? And if particularly if, they're digging a grave in your yard, you should ask, right? All right. So some things that are really, that you need to look at anytime you see any of these tremors or things like that, thyroid and B12. Also iron and anemia, it's all tied. But those are the things that can be totally reversible. But some of the main things that could really, really make a difference. So you can't just jump on the Parkinson's bandwagon. You got to say, hey, look, we have Parkinson's symptoms. Now let's evaluate what's reversible, what's not reversible, and so on. Autonomic systems also affected, right? Blood pressure can be dysregulated, neurogenic bladder, constipation, sexual dysfunction. The number one most common falls that I see is when people get up to pee. They get up to pee, they get up too quickly, and they fall. And that's for a variety of reasons, but usually it's orthostatic hypertension, blood pressure drops, and you fall. So sit there, count to 30, then go pee. Let the blood pressure stabilize, you're totally good. You get in that habit, that'll really reduce the likelihood of falls, right? But we know that there's going to be regulation problems where you may have to pee more than you used to, or you have urinary urgency, you have to go right now. Sometimes people can become incontinent because the muscle control can be affected. This is talking about orthostatic hypertension or syncope. That's where you just pass out. Next. With orthostatic hypertension, people don't always get lightheaded, but you may notice they're confused or seem kind of goofy or a little bit out of it. Or they have an ache around the shoulders and neck. So again, what's important is that you recognize these symptoms and you don't just brush it off onto like, oh, well, this is just Parkinson's. But in the meantime, they're letting you know through symptoms that, hey, I got a fall coming. Right, I got a syncopal episode coming. The blood pressure's not regulating right. We need to get to the doctor to get this looked at. Okay. What do? Manage the meds. Don't overtreat. Water could not matter more. If you want to regulate the autonomic symptoms of Parkinson's, drink water. Right? Drink water. Also, in the moment, elevating your head and all those type of things. There's a variety of things you could do. But water is something that's really overlooked a lot in Parkinson's, but really matters. It really, really, really matters. This one, you can skip to the one after this one. That was just a meds. Urinary, nighttime accidents, a lot of frequency, a lot of urgency. Obstruction is less common. And, it depends on your prostate and your motor issues and all that things. You can skip the next one as well. Actually, I want you to move to common sleep problems. I pointed all the urinary and all the autonomic stuff is if you're having night accidents and you have to go all the time and you're having accidents, you're going to be happy? No. If you're having falls and you're unstable, are you going to be happy? So you got to look at the impact of all these different symptoms on what it means for somebody and their identity and their functionality. And things like going to the bathroom on yourself or being able to manage that on your own really matter. Frankly, it matters more than being able to walk. Being able to feed yourself matters. Like these automatic functions, right, are so core to who we are as just being functional, independent adults. Now, sleep problems are common. Hey, how many days do you think if you go without any sleep before you go totally crazy? And don't tell me if you've tried this on your children. I won't tell you if I've tried it on mine.
3.
That's it. Good job. It is 3. After 3, you get really funky. And by 7, you are completely psychotic.
Did it in college.
Like, yeah. So you've been there. Watch out for this one.
Yeah, it was rough.
You may not have
14
fully
hours.
recovered. So you have people now that the sleep-wake cycle is screwed up and they're not getting a full night's sleep. They may or may not be getting into REM sleep. If they do get into REM sleep, they may have a REM sleep disorder. They may have restless leg syndrome, which is keeping them up. By the way, there's some evidence that restless leg syndrome can be a precursor to Parkinson's. Okay? That it's kind of on a continuum, right? The restless leg is kind of here, and then Parkinson's, some of the Parkinson plus diseases is in here, but in reality, it's a continuum, which is how the brain is regulating automatic motor function, right? But if people aren't sleeping, or if they're sleeping too much, I mean, you guys know if you sleep too much, if you don't really get out of bed much for a couple of days, it sucks. Like you just don't feel good. Like you need to go do something and get outside and it just wears on you. So too much sleep and not enough sleep, having nothing to do with Parkinson's, cause very significant emotional symptoms, including psychosis. So when you add that this is an extremely common problem in Parkinson's, there are mood issues tied to this. So one of the things I really want you to walk away from here, outside of understanding, wow, there's a ton of mood and other symptoms that go with Parkinson's. It's not just motor. And hopefully you feel validated by some of the things that you're seeing. But it's that you need to know what's due to what. For example, right? If you're noting a cognitive decline, is it because we have a new onset of Parkinson's dementia or the meds wrong, or is it because they haven't slept in 3 days? Or is it a side effect of the antipsychotic they gave them? Or are they back on that Klonopin, which is slowing them down? You have to ask these questions because it's easy to assume, hey, look, there's not a lot we can do about these symptoms, but if you target what's causing what, there's way more you can do than you think. You are not powerless to be able to positively impact people, right? Next one. Fatigue, no energy, wiped out, tired. So that's going to happen, right, with sleep problems, and that's going to happen straight Parkinson's. You guys know that, and if you bought this, I'm really sorry. But that thing that you see on TV, you wrap it around your waist, and it like makes you jiggle to get rid of like your belly fat or whatever. You guys know what I mean? Like you sit there on your couch with your beer, and your belly's going like this, and somehow now you're like super like puffed. So and guess what? If you do that and something's activating your muscles, you're gonna get tired, even if it is some weird contraption. So with Parkinson's, think about that tremor. How tiring would it be if I told all of you, I want you to go for 8 hours all day like this, all day. All day. Can't stop, 8 hours. Can't stop, 8 hours. After like 10 minutes, you screw this. Right? So imagine what it's like for someone that even when they're sleeping, they're sucking through their energy through these movements. No wonder they need more sleep. No wonder they're tired and it's exhausting. No wonder they're frustrated and moody. I make you do that for an hour, you're never inviting me back. So it matters, right? It's all in context. And fatigue, just fatigue can be disabling. Look at people with chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia. Of course, fibro has joint pain and more overall pain, but fatigue is incredibly disabling for people in and of itself. So when you look at Parkinson's, again, people think, oh, it's the tremor, oh, it's the rigidity, oh, it's the difficulty with moving around. That's the biggest symptom. But for some people, they don't actually have a lot of tremor. I have patients that just have a real subtle tremor. But holy crap, they are exhausted. And their sleep is terrible. And they're getting dizzy all the time. And their wife thinks they don't love them because their face isn't expressive. But do they have a tremor? Maybe just a little. Or maybe the levodopa-carbidopa is doing a solid job of managing the motor symptoms. But that does not mean it's doing a good job with the rest. Your motor symptoms could be stable-ish, probably the best we got, right? Stable-ish on your levodopa-carbidopa, and you could still have all the mood symptoms. So you really have to look at like global package, because again, remember we talked about quality of life. Patients come to my office, I tell them, our mission here is for you to have the best life you can as long as possible. What does that mean? I'm going to try to keep you as independent as I can as long as I can, right? I want you safe. Can't have you out there driving, running everybody over on Washington Road, right? Need you safe. I want you happy. I want you to be doing things and enjoying your friends and family and not just wasting away watching the news for the 80 millionth time. Right? Now, some of the things that are really helpful for people that have a lot of fatigue, you cannot let them sleep all the time. And naps are bad. Now you get to a point where people need naps. I get it, particularly as the disease advances. But just like with my children, the more naps they get, the less likely they're going to sleep through the night. Right? Now, if somebody's sleeping through the night and then they need naps, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But I would certainly have a problem if nights are a mess and then they're napping. Right? That doesn't work. And what you don't want to do is say, oh, you just need more rest. No, you need to tire them out more. So you want to do hobbies or light exercise and things like that, right? Like when people come to me for insomnia, I don't tell them to sleep more, right? Because insomnia is typically used to people lay there for like whatever, and they start thinking too much, and then they're screwed, right? Brain wavelengths switch, and then by then, you're gone. Really, it's like 15 minutes. If you lie in bed more than 15 minutes, you fall asleep, it's not gonna happen. Might as well go wander around your house and clean something and come back. It's not gonna happen. Your brain wavelengths, counting sheep doesn't work if you're like on sheep number 300 going through 1, 2, right? So what we do is we want to tire ourselves out, but we also need to look for patterns. Let's go back to driving. We talked about driving. We said driving is an automatic motor program, and we had a couple brave souls that admitted they don't pay attention at all when they drive, right? Okay. We can actually use the basal ganglia, despite the fact that it's degenerating, to our advantage. How long do you think it takes for a non-Parkinson's person to develop a new habit? This is old research, actually early 70s, but it holds pretty true. 21 days. So like New Year's resolutions last like a week. But it's 3 weeks for us to start to get in a rhythm. It's plus or minus, of course. It's about 3 weeks. Now, that's based on the basal ganglia, the part that's breaking down in Parkinson's. So it's going to take way longer for someone with Parkinson's to get into a new schedule, a new routine. It's not going to happen in 3 weeks. It might take 6, it might take 7, which means we have to be vigilant. You have to stick to it. But once that motor program is in place, that automatic motor program is in place, function could be much better than it should. I'll give you an example, right? Talk about Alzheimer's. So in Alzheimer's, right, the parts of the brain that are breaking down involve our ability to form new memories. Okay? Basically, guys, there's 2 systems in memory. One starts from a deep part of the front part of our brain, and that runs down right into the middle to the part that has to do with forming memories. And what that does, it helps us pay attention to things to remember, right? So, and the other part is like forming new memories. So like when information comes in, like you're hearing me now, you're seeing me now, whatever, it's senses, right? Hear, taste, feel, whatever. Senses come in, and a part of the brain called the limbic system, in particular something called the hippocampus. And that region manages homeostasis, olfaction, memory, and negative emotion. But when stuff comes in there, it shoots a spider web out behind you. And how do we know that outside of the research? It's because you could smell something and it brings back a memory. You can hear a song and you're back in high school, right? You're at that dance, right? All those are different pathways to the same memory. So, I mean, you could lose some of those wires and you're still pretty good because you got a bunch of them leading to that, right? So in Alzheimer's, the part of the brain that forms the spider web is what breaks down. But in Alzheimer's, the part that doesn't break down is the basal ganglia that does in Parkinson's. So what happens in Alzheimer's is, guys, we die first. So anyway, so we die, and then our wives are still alive, and they've been in the house for 40 years, and they're doing it all right-ish, right? Then they fall and break their hip, right? Or they go for walking in 1,000 degrees Augusta and get dehydrated. They end up at the ER. Now they have to wait in the hall because of COVID. They finally get seen, right? And they're super friggin' confused. And they call me at 11 o'clock at night to go figure out what the world's wrong. This family says they were fine yesterday. No, they were not fine at all. They've been living on autopilot. You could go in their house and you could say, hey, what's this? What is this bill? I don't know. I never got that. Right? You could tell them there's a cup filled with coffee. Who made that? I don't know. What is that? But the house is perfectly clean. Everything's managed. Everything's done. It's total autopilot. Right? Total autopilot. So even though intellectually they're here, functioning is here. Because it's different parts of the brain. So when we have our Parkinson's patients, sorry, what's important is we sit there and we say, okay, what routine do we want to put in place? And how does that routine support their continued independence? And how does it protect them from sleep problems and emotional difficulties? Sounds easy, right? Yeah, it's not. But what does that mean? We're getting up at the same time every day. We go through our routine in the same order every morning, right? Our exercise is at the same day, like the same day of the week at the same time, and it's regimented, built in. Family visits at the same day, at the same time every week. Don't randomly show up to see your loved ones. Don't. I'll give you a personal example. In high school, my grandmother had Lewy body dementia, right? Which is, she saw animals and people, and they called her Hollywood. Anyway, so very reserved 50s woman who was not so reserved with the disease. But ultimately, like, when you looked at her and you worked with her, you would find that if you didn't plan how you're going to interact with her, there was a lot of emotions that went with it. So I was in high school, and I would dip out of high school and go visit her. I mean, most kids don't skip class to go visit their grandma. They go, like, you know, go drink or something, but I visited my grandma. And I made things much worse. And I didn't know. I was in high school. So I'd show up and be like, hey, grandma, you know, it's so great to see you. And she got so anxious. She couldn't remember when I was going to come. And she was so worried she was going to miss me. And she didn't want to, like, offend me or like I was there. And so she would just spend like all day by the door waiting for me. And couldn't remember. And they would tell her, no, Betty, you know, she's coming. You know, he's not coming today, or we don't know if he's coming yet. And I just thought, like, as much as I could see her while I could, right? Absolutely not. Once I realized that if I came twice a week at 4 o'clock and I wrote it down and I put it on our calendar and we got it all structured down, in the beginning she was annoyed because I wasn't coming as much. But when we got in the routine, it was so much better. I'd find her in the cafeteria or off with her friends doing something. And she didn't have that anxiety because it was ingrained and it was structured and she could remember and it was routine. So less was more. So particularly in the earlier stages of Parkinson's, when it's easier to set up the routine, right? As you get more advanced, it's pretty hard. We all know that. It gets really hard. In the beginning, you want to put that exercise and that structure and that sleep and the eating and all these things in much of in that routine as possible. And that involves built-in social contact. I have a lot of patients that got a lot worse over the last year because of COVID. Not because they got COVID. They didn't get COVID. But all the good habits they had went away. All the social interactions, the coffee with friends on Sundays, the meetings, the family visits, meetings with the grandkids, all that stuff went away. And then it kind of came back and now it's going all funky again. A lot of the exercise, the meetings at the gym, right? All of that, the walks with your friends, all that fell to the wayside. So these habits that are so hard to put in place all fell apart. And now we were way over 21 days. So you got new crappy habits, right? So again, it's important that we take these deliberate steps to say, how do we get back into the swing of things while still being safe in order to, you know, manage this, right? In order to kind of do what's best for us. Let's see. Next slide. No, I'll try to wrap up as I can, guys. Rem Sleep Disorders more often in men than women, just as a heads up. It's like complex movements or fighting or like actual action when you're sleeping. Particularly people with like PTSD, they will act things out. So just you have to be really aware. And it can happen years before actual Parkinson's, right? Years. Same thing with the orthostatic hypertension, it can happen years before. And the same thing with the syncope, right? Same thing with the hallucinations, same thing with the depression, right? So what we're talking here is your non-motor symptoms often come first, but they're only dealt with last, right? You could skip over the next 3. Let's go to, sorry, I'm skipping a lot. All right, so I'm going to talk freely now as I run through it. You don't need more slides, you can just flip through them. But I think, like, when you look at Parkinson's from a thinking perspective, if I was going to summarize it, you're going to see slow processing is the #1 issue. People are going to have problems remembering things when they want to, but it comes to them later. One of the issues, people don't wait for themselves. They're not patient with themselves. Their loved ones aren't patient with them. If they can't remember, they'll chime in the word or they'll jump in for them. When in reality, right? When in reality, we just need the time and the encouragement and it will come to them, right? Short-term memory problems are not common in Parkinson's. No, I take that back. They are common in Parkinson's, but it's a problem finding the stuff in the closet. It's not a problem where the closet's empty. Okay? Sleep is a huge problem. Same thing with autonomic symptoms, right? And that's everything from GI issues, urinary, bladder, all that stuff, sexual dysfunction, and certainly all those things lead to emotional difficulties. You have depression and anxiety, not just because you have to adjust to what's happening, but also because your chemicals and your hormones and everything are totally out of whack, right? But there's stuff we can do. And we can't blame people. We have to recognize it for what it is. We have to check our frustrations with our loved ones. We have to understand that this is part of the disease. They're not doing this to us. When my patient refused to go to physical therapy, he wasn't doing it to his wife, which is how she took it. You don't want to live. You don't love me. No, he's tired of being talked like a child and having no control over his life. And the only thing he thinks he can control is saying no to you. Right? So personality changes are common in Parkinson's. Mood symptoms are common in Parkinson's. Thinking problems are common in Parkinson's. And frankly, all those are just as important as the motor symptoms. Because we're talking about quality of life and happiness. So you can't ignore those things. Okay? Any questions for me? I feel like I went through an insane amount of information, like an hour and whatever. Is it helpful, I hope? Yes, ma'am.
What about melatonin?
Melatonin is absolutely safe. Yes, ma'am. Melatonin, I typically tell people just to follow the bottle because it really is dependent on the person, right? So you want to start kind of with a low dose, and then you get to a point where you feel like, you know, it's appropriate. You really can't overdose on it. So, you know, it's not something that you really need to watch ultra carefully. Usually if people follow the bottle, they kind of regulate their system a little bit. Melatonin helps-ish, typically, right? It's not a magic fix, but it does seem to make a little bit of a difference. Is that what your guys' experience has been with melatonin as well? Is it kind of helps-ish? Yeah.
Also, placebo effect. That's what we're desperately does for a while.
That's right. Hey, we take what we can get, you know, placebo or otherwise. I tried that with my kid, it didn't work. Yes, melatonin's totally safe, completely totally safe. Yes, sir.
We often hear about rewiring. You know, I guess the question is, how much rewiring in the brain can take place, or happens, I guess, to find new channels to effectively, you know, move or accomplish that? That's
A lot of rewiring. They used to say after like 40, you're totally screwed. And you're not, thankfully, right? It's kind of like, you know how they used to have that adage, it's like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Remember that? Yeah, it's not true. It just takes the dog forever, right? So that's what happens when you learn something new, or you learn a new way of doing something. That is a new connection. That is a new wire. It's strengthening the old wires. It's strengthening the old wires and creating new ones. So what will happen is with Parkinson's, it's like you have a freeway and all your major roads have potholes in them, right? And you get to a point where you can't fill in that pothole anymore, but you can form a detour. Now that detour is never going to be as fast, it's never going to be as efficient, and it goes through the mountains, but it'll still get there. So the new wires are the detours, and that's why things like exercise and getting enough oxygen and keeping your brain active, because legitimately you are rewiring your brain. The problem is as it goes on, you know, the rate at which you can acquire new neurons isn't fast enough to make up for the stuff that you're missing. But that doesn't mean it doesn't, you know, counteract it and buy you a lot of time. Yes, ma'am.
I know a lot of people that I've dealt with over here that I went through it with my mom. Is in your mind you can say, I know this is not them doing it, I know they're not doing it, but the frustration and the guilt and the anger and the hope, you're feeling all the depression symptoms yourself, what would be maybe some key thing? I mean, I just have to walk out and go to the yard sometimes, just, you know, just if you had to do something. Are there any tips that you could give people for dealing with those feelings the caregiver has toward the patient?
Sure.
Dealing the best with the patient.
I'll start with the obvious and then go to the not obvious, right? So obviously reframing, setting yourself up, beginning of the day, end of the day, right? Reminding yourself in the morning, all right, whatever happens, they're not going to be doing it on purpose. I need to kind of check myself, reflecting on how you did in managing your own symptoms at the end of the day, right? All that's effective. Certainly there are meds that help, right? I'm not a fan for anxiety meds, I think, but regardless, there are meds that can help one way or another. Also, you have to make sure you sleep. You must sleep. But then the other behavioral techniques can be helpful. So for example, well, outside of the behavioral technique, I think getting help really, really matters. So even if that's a caregiver or a helper that comes in for an hour, that hour will be gold. And you time that when you need the break, right? So that you have set up a schedule where, you know, you can kind of get some basically release. The best like analogy I can give you is it's like you have a bucket of water and that bucket's like 99% full. In the beginning, you can carry it pretty good, but holy crap, that thing is heavy over time. And when it starts to get heavy, now it doesn't take much for it to overflow. Right now, just a little drop overflows, and it overflows way more than it should because of the situation. So what that means is you better get water out of your bucket regularly. You do it with your exercise, you can go talk with your girlfriend, you can have a glass of wine, you can do whatever in the world you want, but you better regularly get water out of your bucket or it will overflow. In the minute when it's happening, you need to pause long enough to collect your thoughts because your emotions and your thought process aren't lining up. Intellectually, you know it's not their fault. Emotionally, it's 100% their fault. So a way to do that would be distract yourself. And there are two very easy techniques. One is breathing, but it just feels awkward to do it. But the equivalent of that is a giant yawn. A yawn will push about 20% more oxygen into the brain and basically turns on your parasympathetic nervous system to help you relax. Right? And you don't look like a total jerk. But like if you're sitting there stressed out and you can feel your blood pressure rising, you can feel it like just a huge yawn. And that gives you just enough pause, both biologically to stop the sympathetic nervous system, I'm going to kill you response, right? Right? And it gives you enough pause intellectually to collect, okay, wait, what am I doing here? The other one that's super helpful is to take your foot and push it into the floor with the balls of your foot as hard as you absolutely can to the point it hurts. Push hard. And I teach this to kids all the time, right? Because they can do it under their desk at school. They get anxious at school or they're getting upset at school and they don't want other kids to see, or they don't want to act out and they're trying to learn to control their behavior. They can push their foot really hard under their desk until they feel like they can control themselves again. And what you're doing is you take your emotions and you're jamming it into the floor. I mean, you are jamming it into the floor. And what's happening, you are getting water out of your bucket, right? By clenching the muscles and by pushing that down. So these are really basic techniques, but they really are useful and they're simple and they don't require like all these steps to prepare, you know? You could sit there and, I mean, seriously, if you're ever stressed out, like try yawning, like it really does help, no joke. It adds the same amount of oxygen as diaphragmatic breathing, but you're not sitting there going, you know, you do that down Broad Street, they'll call me. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah.
Give you guys some techniques. Sure.
You mentioned a little bit about this earlier on. So I once asked one of our neurology doctors here that helps a number of people. How much of med school is spent studying things like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's? And the answer was, well, a couple hours, maybe med school.
Not for me.
So
So it depends on the provider, right?
Yeah.
So a neurologist is a whole body. I'm only a brain guy. So like for me, I mean, you know, I didn't spend everything on movement disorders, but like on residency, it was a third of what I did. with straight movement disorders, particularly like Parkinson plus diseases, the really rare ones. I mean, it was like 6 months of nonstop, day in and day out lectures and patients, and that's what we did. Because it was a movement disorder clinic through University of Alabama, which, by the way, UAB has an unreal movement disorders program. But so like for me, it was a specialization kind of in that, and it was also the same thing. It was basically for me, it's brain injury, dementia, and then movement disorders. But I also do just 2 on up, so I do like a bunch of kids and genetic disorders and epilepsies and whatever. But I think it just depends on the provider. You know, there are neurologists that go through advanced fellowships in movement disorders, but that is not your random neurologist at some random private practice. You know.
What about niacin and how much niacin do you need supposed to help?
It is helpful. I don't know the exact amount off the top of my head, but all the research I've read is that's really helpful with the muscles in particular and the control. I don't know the exact amount off the top of my head. I'd be happy to email you that.
Have you done research on medical marijuana?
Okay, so let's talk about this. So a little bit of history, not history, a little bit of information about marijuana. Okay, so marijuana, you see kind of out there now, it's legal-ish in different states, and there's like different strains and different things. Okay, so there's indica and sativa are the 2 main types of marijuana. Okay, sativa is more activating, it gives people more energy, and is less helpful for things like anti-inflammation and things like that, right? Indica is better for things like sleep and inflammation and things to that. So we have 2 strains that do things a little bit different. As those strains are break down, you have the flowers themselves, the marijuana, right? And then you have the stems that they call hemp. Out of the hemp, one of the chemicals you can pull out is called delta-8. Delta-8 is legal in Georgia, and you'll see it at the stores like out there, right? Selling, you know, CBD or whatever, you'll see that. That is THC, but it's not the same THC as delta-9, right? Which is a different chemical kind of derivative. So what that means is it's not all the same, right? The strands are different, the types are different, what kind of chemical variant is different, and they all seem to have different effects. Really cool study looked at driving and marijuana. And they had medical marijuana, which frankly was low in the THC that gets you high, but was high in the anti-inflammatory traits and things like that. With marijuana you buy on the street, which you can care less if it's anti-inflammatory, the whole point is to get you high, right? So they compared the 2, and then they got people super stoned and decided, let's go see how they drive, right? Don't take part in this study. Anyway, just, yeah, or be on the road when they're doing it. But what they found is people with the medical marijuana drove better. They paid attention better. The processing speed wasn't slow. They were less anxious and less reactive. The people that used the marijuana off the street were terrible drivers. Super slow, couldn't pay attention, were kind of groggy. So my point is, it is absolutely not all the same, but there's really, really good research on the anti-inflammatory effects of marijuana and the effects on sleep and the effects on, you know, appetite and all these other things. You know, the problem is, of course, it's not legal everywhere, but B is it's not well regulated and done in a way where like the right thing can be given to the right person for the right reason. You know, and so my hope is that it's legalized so that can happen. You have the person that, I mean, my dad has terrible rheumatoid arthritis to the point that rheumatoid arthritis can eat through your body and raises your resting metabolism by 70%. So he's lost a crap ton of weight because the rheumatoid arthritis is basically burning through all of his calories, right? But like, how much can he eat, right? And he's like, I'm like 80 years old. It's like, how much can I freaking eat? And so it'd be great if the doctor could give him something to stimulate his appetite a little bit, but doesn't affect his thinking, doesn't increase his risk of dementia or anything else, doesn't affect his, like, I really, that'd be great for him. But I don't want him out there smoking at 80 years old. So like, right, I think there's really good research. And frankly, I think it's probably, when all the dust settles, is going to be better than a lot of the prescriptions we have. And in particular, I'm talking about medications for anxiety and pain. because those opioids and those benzos anxiolytics are so addictive. Your Klonopins and your Xanaxes and, I mean, even your Valiums, right? Or all your opioids, all that crap is so addictive. I'd love an option that wasn't addictive for patients. So that's my 2 cents on it. You know, I'm not telling you to go buy it from the neighborhood guy in the corner. But I'm telling you that the research is really positive, which is why I think there's such a trend. And I think the environment where the opioid crisis became such a huge mess really kind of set the stage for people to consider, you know, something other than like a straight traditional med. Speaking of that, though, there are supplements that are really good for the brain. And there's a ton of crap. There's a ton of stuff out there that they advertise and does nothing. My general rule of thumb is that has a celebrity, I'm not going to buy it. If you need a celebrity like Chef to sell your drug, it's probably not going to work. But what does the research support? B vitamins, particularly B12, B complex, energy, short-term memory, ginkgo, fish oil. If you do fish oil, get the burpless kind, which is disgusting. You can also eat salmon once a week. Salmon's really about as good as you can get in terms of like omega-3s. It's really like the fattier fish that's better for the brain, but the mercury is stored in the fat of fish. So you got to be careful which one you get. So like, for example, mackerel is really high in fat, but it's also high in mercury, so you shouldn't eat it that often. For salmon, you're good to go. Other things, acetylcholine, C-I-T-I-C-O-L-I-N-E. That's not acetylcholine, it's acetylcholine. That helps new nerves grow, helps you grow new nerves. We talked about forming detours in the brain. That's a supplement that help you form new detours. You'll find that is one of the active ingredients in most of the TV stuff, right? They'll say we have 5 different things that do blah, 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 blah to the brain, and 4 of them do nothing. Usually the one that actually has solid research is acetylcholine, like, you know, Nariva is one you see on TV. That stuff my patients usually just buy it on Amazon as well, and you'll see like 50 different brands, and they all have unreal reviews. Legitimately, people really notice the difference.
That's Citicoline?
Cita, C-I-T-I-C-O-L-I-N-E. And again, do your own research. None of this stuff's regulated. If you have questions, email me. I'll tell you what I've researched, but it's your call. Look it up, you know. The other one is CoQ10. CoQ10, very evidence to help the heart and oxygenation, but if it helps the heart, it's probably going to help the brain. So that's the research we're doing now, and you know, ultimately the results are extremely promising. So, you know, from a supplements perspective, those can be helpful. You know, and frankly, some of that's probably more helpful than some of the meds that are out there. And again, I can't flex enough the importance of physical exercise and drinking water and things like that for Parkinson's. It just really, really matters. Also, speech therapy, guys. Speech language therapy can be helpful with Parkinson's. It can be helpful if you have the swallowing problems, but it's also helpful just working on how do I compensate for us, you know, and how do I work on my articulation or my speech, or, you know, OT and PT can be helpful as well. I tend to push for OT and PT for people that just don't have the oomph to do the physical exercise, because they'll say no to their spouse, but they're not going to say no to the Q person who's trying to get them to work out. So reality, like, it's just the truth, you know. Any other questions, guys? Snide remarks? Again, I can email you all that. I'm always really careful to give people recommendations on dosages because, again, you know, this stuff isn't studied to the point that it's like approved or not approved. So I can email you that stuff, but I'm cautious to put that on a live webinar.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't think that's in anyone's best interest. But again, I'm happy to email you my thoughts, and I encourage you to look things up yourself as well. And all that stuff can be really helpful. Any other questions, guys? If you have questions about like thinking or emotions or any of this stuff, I truly am happy to answer them. Same thing with caregiving or dementias and Alzheimer's or any of this stuff. Yes, ma'am.
For me, an emotion is hardest to deal with is sadness. I feel mourning the loss of my whole life.
You are. You don't feel like you are. You are mourning the loss of your old life. And actually, I think it's probably way more than that. I think you're mourning the life you thought you were going to have. right? Because it's not so much, okay, I lost blah, blah, blah. It's that because you did all these great things. It's that I thought I was going to do this or interact with my kids in this way, my grandkids this way. This is how I thought my life was going to be. So you mourn the dream that is. And that is totally fair, totally reasonable, and totally human. And if you didn't, I would worry about you. Sometimes lack of emotion is a sign something's wrong, not emotion. Like life should be hard sometimes.
We brought up before that a lot of people feel like they don't have an outlet for emotions like that. Do you advise like a therapist that has knowledge with that, or like who do you talk to?
Yeah, we have therapists that we do a lot of telehealth for therapy with COVID. But my preference is if possible, people should be to actually see their doctor 1 out of every 3 times, just because it's just not the same. But I mean, we offer telehealth, and we have, people that do what I do and the people that work for me, and we're medicine first. So, we really deal with patients with predominantly medical issues that have psych overlay. We do not deal with predominantly psych patients that just so happen to have something medical. So we have some bipolar, schizophrenics, or whatever, but that's really not what we do. It's people with multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and fibromyalgia or diabetes, which by the way affects the brain, and all these other things. So there are people that specialize in that. And if you want some help, we'll set you up. We take all insurance but Medicaid because it sucks for me. But otherwise, like, we're happy to help. Yeah, and groups like this are wonderful for you guys. I'm really encouraged that you guys are all here, particularly given like COVID and everything else. It's really encouraging for me to see all of you. Anyway.
You mentioned the B12 and the thyroid, so how often should they be tested for those levels?
Well, it depends if there was a problem, right? So if you had a problem before, usually that's done, as often as every couple months to every 6 months. If it's generally stable, annually is fine. But usually if the doctor's running your labs, I would say, hey, can you run those just in case? And they don't care, they bill it, So I usually just tell my patients, hey, if you're having memory problems and your doctor's running your labs, or you're going to your doctor and it's just like a checkup, say, hey, can you run my memory panel? And that is, that's the things we just talked about. So it's a pretty standard like neurology memory panel that looks at thyroid, B vitamins. Sometimes we'll do ANA labs, which looks at the autoimmune disorders. But it's like a panel that you order. You click, I want a memory panel. It runs through those things.
Because those of you had a severe cognitive decline.
With any. I mean, you can have someone in their 40s that's feeling tired and can't focus, and the thyroid's wonky, right? I mean, if I'm having thinking problems, I want to make sure it's not something that's reversible first, right? So labs should come first. Yeah, sure.
There's a saying that if you know one person with Parkinson's, you know one person with Parkinson's. It's just so very different. And sometimes I feel like we said be patient with ourselves, be kind to ourselves. I feel like, why can't I be like the guy on American Ninja with Parkinson's? Or why do I have to be like Michael J. Fox and have sporadic movements and stuff before people believe that you have Parkinson's? Or it's hard trying to explain to people. It's not like cancer, which has standard set of symptoms and problems.
That's right.
It's hard.
It is hard. People don't understand. People aren't always nice, and people believe what they see. I mean, I remember when my wife was pregnant and she had a broken ankle. Bad story. But anyway, and everyone offered her help. Everyone opened the door for her, and when she had problems, she's a lawyer, so like when she had hearings, they would really watch out for her and stuff like that, right? Well, she had a different problem a while back, and it was something nobody could really see, and she got no help at all. And she could tell people, hey, this is happening, and I've had a chronic migraine for like a week straight, and people are like, oh yeah, whatever, right? Or you can have a concussion, right? A concussion doesn't show up on a scan, right? Doesn't show up on imaging, and you look fine, but then you have all these problems. So you're right, it is really hard. Hopefully people have the maturity about them to be able to ask and understand. But hear me, it is their job to learn about you. It is not your job to tell everyone, right? So at some point, like, people need to grow up and have some maturity and, you know, have these conversations, and that is partially their responsibility. I'll give you an example of kind of what I'm thinking. You go into Walmart. I hate Walmart. Sorry. Ugh. You go into Walmart and you're sitting there and you're trying to sit there at the checkout line, and, you know, you're moving really slow and you're having trouble pulling out your debit card and getting in that stupid little slot where it never fits right, or it doesn't go in all the way, and then your chip doesn't work, right? And you got this crazy line behind you where everyone looks like they're going to kill you in the parking lot. You know, you shouldn't. You need to work on not feeling rushed, not worrying about whatever's going on behind you. And it's okay to say, you know, it takes me a while. That's it. Right? And they need to adjust to you. You don't need to speed up. All that's going to do is cause you to make a mistake. They need to adjust to you. And we do that by informing and by not getting upset or not getting angry or not feeling pressure, but just explain it. And that's a real process. And like, really, that's something we work on with people in therapy often, particularly after like brain injury and concussion, is how to be so comfortable with yourself and the things that are going on that you don't let, like, frankly, people that might be a little bit ignorant affect you. But it is 100% hard, and it is very different from person to person.
Part of the reason I got involved with the group is not because I have a direct correlation with a family member with Parkinson's, but, you know, I didn't know that much, not anything. I knew about Parkinson's. But once I started talking to, you know, each and every one of you, I originally just came on to help with technology. Then I saw how ignorant the rest of the world is, to be honest. You know, I said I was assisting with, you know, the pop walk, and I had people say, oh, okay, you know, because of the tremors. And I'm like, well, it's more than the tremors. And then say, well, what is it? And I'm like, oh my gosh, nobody knows anything about Parkinson's unless you have a family member or a friend or somebody who you know that has Parkinson's. So I think that's what's so important. I mean, everybody knows about Alzheimer's, everybody knows about cancer, but it's time for Parkinson's to, it's terrible to say, but come into the spotlight. Let's talk about it.
And that's really, you know, one of the take-home messages today is that people are so focused on the motor symptoms, they miss all these other factors that are frankly just as important when talking about quality and length of life. And a lot of these things actually come way before, you know, the motor symptoms even start. So like, all this focus is on motor symptoms because you could see it, but all the things you can't see are just as important and affect our life just as much. Well, thanks, guys. Glad to be back. You guys are awesome.
Oh, yeah, if you have anything that you missed, or, you know, I saw a couple of you writing down notes, you can see it all on Facebook or right on our website. And then this was more impactful last month when it was raining, but here's the support from umbrella.
I'm happy to help you guys with anything else. If you have questions about like your family or things, just call my office or email me. And you know, you don't have to come in. I'm happy to have conversations with you about whatever. On our website, it says email the CEO or behavioral associates. It just comes to me. You can just email me. You can also find me through AU or through Inpatient Psych Solutions. One of my businesses manages all mental health for Doctors Hospital. And so like these services, at least on an inpatient basis, are now fully integrated. So meaning like if you end up at Doctors, you know that all of us are there to help manage these things. So we're trying, right? We're trying to take these settings where people don't often know, or a Parkinson's patient may end up in the ER and be hallucinating, and the doctor doesn't know what to do, and now they stick them in some crazy unit somewhere, when in reality, and they give them an antipsychotic, which makes everything worse. Right now there's someone that says, hey, actually they're all right, they can go home. Let's just do these type of things. So we're really trying to kind of follow through with your guys' mission, do a better job of managing.
So if anyone is fervently scribbling on the other end of this, what's your website? How can they reach
It's
you?
nbageorgia.com. So like the basketball, NBA, and then georgiaspelledout.com. Or you could email me, and it's Jeremy, Jeremy, .Hertza, Hertza, at NBAGeorgia, again, spelled out.com. Yeah, I'm happy to help whoever, or answer questions, and same things like if you have more questions about the supplements or about Alzheimer's or about any of that kind of stuff that wasn't a directly part of this topic today, we can have this conversation.
Thank you for your time, Dr.
Yeah, happy to be here, guys. Thank you.
At this point, to everyone that's listening in the room and also on Zoom, obviously with the way the world is taking us, we don't know that we'll necessarily be here in person next time. We hope we will, but bear with us. We try and make, as the board of the support group, as last minute decision as possible, praying and hoping that we'll be in a good place to have an in-person meeting. But I just want to let you all know that. And if we can support you here or on Zoom or Facebook in any way, please let us know. So thank you again, Dr. Hertza. Catherine, you have a question?
Y'all have some water in the back, if anybody wants.